Good morning, good people, brothers, sisters, and beautifully divine siblings in the movement. Welcome to the unapologetic voice of labor, equity, and action. This is the CWA Hour Power Radio Show, where we amplify the organizers, uplift everyday workers, and honor the giants whose shoulders we stand on right here on KYOK 1140 AM and 106.5 FM in the heart of Houston, Texas. If you're rolling through H-Town or just fired up anywhere in the world, stream us live at kyokradio.org on the CWA Strong app or catch the replay anytime by searching CWA Hour of Power on your favorite podcast platform, because this space, this time, it's about us. That's right, it's about us. We're talking union contracts, organizing victories, labor rights, human dignity, fair pay, and bold everyday resistance to injustice in all its forms. So whether you're on the job, in your car, at the kitchen table, or deep in the fight, lean in, honk your horns, and stand with workers. Joining me today are the fire starters and the truth tellers. Sir Reginald Small is somewhere traveling around the world. Timmia Wiley is here, though, and David Marshall is here. And then my Kia Jones will slide in just a little bit later. So buckle up, beloveds, because the power we build together, that power is ours. The Communication Workers of America invites you to the 2026 National Human Rights Conference happening August 16th through 19th in Atlanta. Join union leaders and activists from across the country as we come together to build power, advance justice, and fight for workers' rights. This year's conference will be held at the beautiful Westin Peachtree Plaza, located in the heart of downtown Atlanta. Hey guys, if you need to register, let's go to CWAHumanRights.com. Don't miss this opportunity to connect, learn, and organize for a stronger, more just future. And we'll see you in Atlanta. And while we're right here, family, when I look at the lineup of the CWA National Human Rights Conference, I see more than just a list of speakers. I see people who have dedicated their lives to changing communities. We're talking about Senator John Ossoff, Stacey Abrams, Representative Justin Pearson, Congresswoman Nikema Williams, Mayor Jasmine Cabo, Labor Leader David Huerta, educator and activist Alyssa Johnson, spoken word artist Caleb Rainey, labor champion Robert Roche, pollster and strategist Terrence Woodbury, and Felicia Charlton. That's an incredible collection of voices bringing different experiences all in one place.
And Errol, that's what makes this conference different. These folks aren't coming just to give speeches. They're bringing experience from government, from labor, from organizing, from education, from research, and community leadership. And when you get that many perspectives in one room, people leave thinking differently than when they arrived.
And don't forget, those speakers are only part of it. The workshops are just as exciting. They'll cover everything from artificial intelligence, immigration, allyship, oligarchy, and mental health. Those aren't just headlines. They're issues affecting our jobs, our families, and our communities every single day. And I love how the conference ends. It doesn't just send everybody home after the last speech. It wraps up with an interactive activist model where attendees can connect directly with human rights, labor rights, and social justice organizations from across the country. That's where people discover new ideas, build partnerships, and find ways to get involved when they return home.
And that's something, we don't talk about enough. You can hear a keynote speaker, but, it's often those conversations in the hallways, in the workshop discussions, and those connections with organizers that become the spark for the next campaign or the next community project.
You're exactly right, David. And this conference is 4 days of education, activism, action, and it's about our human rights agenda forward, not just talking about it. It's about building resistance through resilience. It's about making sure working people understand what's changing around them and equip them to respond.
Because knowledge is power, but only if we use it. And action is what turns knowledge into change.
So if you're planning to join us in Atlanta this August, come ready to learn, come ready to network, come ready to challenge yourself. Hear from Senator John Ossoff, Stacey Abrams, Representative Justin Pearson, Congresswoman Nakima Williams, Mayor Jasmine Cobble, David Huerta, Elissa Johnson, Caleb Rainey, Robert Roach, Terrence Woodbury, Felicia Charlton, and many, many more, because this conference isn't just about lectures. It's not just about talk. It's about taking action. It's about educating our people. It's about strengthening our movement. And it's about making sure that when we leave Atlanta, we return home better equipped to fight for justice, defend workers' rights, and build stronger communities. So we will see you in Atlanta. You're listening to KYOK 1140 AM in the all-new 106.5 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you by visiting KYOKradio.org and pressing the Listen Live option. Tune in live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on KYOKradio.org, the CWA Strong app, or your preferred podcast player. Search for CWA Hour of Power on your favorite podcast player. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at CWA National Human Rights to stay connected. Share your thoughts and join the conversation. Up next, we'll have David Marshall leading off with what we're talking about. Is there a new movement, democratic socialism, and what is it? Socialism versus capitalism. Take it away, David.
All right. Before I open this up, I just want to give you a warm welcome back, Errol. If I had the soundboard today, I'd have the Welcome Carter theme queued up for you, ready to go. We missed you, and we are just so happy you're back on the show.
Thank you so much. It's good to be back. I missed you guys. I missed you guys, and I'm glad we had somebody to sit in and handle this. And what I've been hearing, you've gotten some rave reviews. So just keep it up, David.
Well, I appreciate that, sir. And I'm going to start off today's conversation. I'm going to start off today's conversation that may be one of the most important we've had all year, because I think it really affects every single listener, whether you realize it or not. You know, when you turn on the television or you scroll through your social media or you listen to a political speech, you're going to hear words like capitalism, socialism, democratic socialism, all of those being thrown around almost every single day. But here's my question. If someone asked you to explain the difference in plain English, could you? You know, most people couldn't, and that's okay. So today we're going to slow this conversation down, and for the next few minutes, forget political parties, you know, forget campaign slogans, forget what you've heard from cable news or your social media account. You know, imagine you've never heard these words before, you know, because today we're going to explain them in a way that anyone will be able to understand. And this ain't about telling you what to believe. You know, it's not about endorsing one political philosophy over another. It's about understanding ideas before repeating labels. So, you know, let's get into it, Errol. And Timmia, let's begin with the most important question first. You know, should working people care? I'll start with you, Errol.
Okay. And so my thing, David, is why should the average worker, someone loading baggage, answering customer service calls, teaching school, driving a truck, or working in a hospital, even care about this discussion? And it really boils down to economics, because economics isn't something that only happens on Wall Street. Economics determine what happens on your street. It determines what happens on my street. It affects your paycheck, the price of groceries, whether you can afford childcare, whether you can afford health care, whether your employer offers a pension. And I really could stay right there for a minute, or a 401k, because pensions are not heard about these days. You know, whether your children can go to college without taking a lifetime of debt, whether you can buy a home, whether you can retire with dignity. So when people hear words like capitalism or democratic socialism, they're not just hearing political terms, they're hearing ideas that can influence their everyday lives.
Well, and then let me turn it over to Makia. Most people don't wake up saying, "I wonder what economic system I live under," do they?
Mm.
Or Timmia, you there?
No, they wake up saying, I hope I have enough money to pay rent.
Right.
My insurance premium went up. Me. Gas cost more. I need another job. That's why today's conversations matter. People may not use economic terms every day, but they live with the results of economic decisions every day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, do you think, people sometimes hear these words and immediately become defensive before they even know what they mean?
Oh, absolutely. The moment someone says capitalism or socialism, people often choose a safe aside before anyone has explained the definitions. That's why I appreciate this conversation so much. Before we debate anything, let's understand that what we're really actually talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then here's something that surprises a lot of people. America isn't completely capitalist.
You're right.
Almost no country today is completely capitalist, and almost no country today is completely socialist. So, let me turn it back to you, Errol. Help us understand that.
Well, one of the things is most modern economists are what economists call mixed economies. And that means they combine private enterprise with public services. And just think about America. Private companies build airplanes, they manufacture automobiles, develop software, operate banks, run restaurants. But at the same time, taxpayers fund public schools, police departments, fire departments, roads, libraries, Social Security, Medicare, veteran. Let me back up because Social Security, we pay into that. That's our money in there, and I'll leave that alone because I know we can digress on that. We can go somewhere on that particular subject, but we won't stay there. We pay into that. Veterans benefits, the national parks, those aren't privately funded, they're publicly funded. So America has always been a combination of public and private institutions.
That's probably
And
the first thing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I was gonna say that's probably the first thing today that's going to surprise people because many of us have been taught to think in terms of either
Either
or,
or. Mm-hmm.
right? Either capitalism or socialism, when in reality, our country already has elements of both public and private responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably why this conversation becomes so emotional. People hear one word and assume they already know everything that comes with it, but the reality is much more complicated.
Well, and that's why I want to simplify this. Imagine two neighborhoods. Neighborhood one, everyone owns a private business. And if your business succeeds, you become wealthy. And if it
Mm-hmm.
fails, you lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
Businesses, compete for customers. Healthcare is mostly purchased privately, and college is largely paid for by individuals and families. Workers negotiate mostly on their own unless they're represented by a union. That's generally what people think when they describe capitalism. Now, on the flip side, neighborhood number two, people can still own businesses, people can still become wealthy, but the government plays a larger role in helping fund things like healthcare and education, retirement programs, and paid family leave. Taxes are generally higher to help pay for those services, and workers often have stronger legal protections depending on the country. That's generally what's closer to what people describe as democratic socialism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that example. It makes these ideas feel real instead of political. Because at the end of the day, every country has to answer the same question. How much should individuals provide for themselves and how much should society provide together? And reasonable people can answer that question differently.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
That's what democracy is all about.
Well, and I can tell you just from my perspective, we all pay in taxes. We all, I don't care what you do in America, you pay into taxes. And so
Right.
what are we getting for that? What are we getting? Are we getting goods and services? Are we funding wars? Are we, paying for tax breaks? I mean, we need to take ownership of this. This is our money, and we need to, follow the trail and see where it goes. But I will back it up, and let's go into some defining words here, like capitalism itself. Errol, can you define capitalism in plain English for us today?
Let me see if I can break that down for you in plain English. Capitalism is an economic system where most businesses and property are privately owned, and people invest money, businesses compete, consumers choose where to spend their money, companies seek to earn profit. Supporters of capitalism argue that competition encourages innovation. When businesses compete, they're motivated to improve products and create new ideas and lower prices and provide better services. And that's why capitalism is often associated with entrepreneurship and economic growth.
But, we do hear that, capitalism also has its critics. Why do you believe that?
Well, the thing about it is critics point to issues like income inequality, rising healthcare costs, unaffordable housing, and the concentration of wealth. They ask whether markets alone always produce fair outcomes for working people. Those are really the legitimate questions in a democratic society, and they're part of why these debates, really continue.
And that's important. You can believe capitalism has created tremendous innovation, while others believe it can be improved. Those ideas aren't mutually exclusive. Most families,
Exactly.
most families aren't debating economic theory around the dinner table. They're asking, can I work hard and still afford a decent life?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question many Americans are trying to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's exactly where we'll continue after a break. We'll come back and define democratic socialism. We'll talk about socialism itself. We'll look at America's economic history, including the role labor and enslaved Africans played in building wealth, and begin asking perhaps the biggest question of all. What kind of economy should we be building for the next generation? And if you're joining us today, we're slowing down one of the biggest conversations happening in America. And again, it's not to tell you what to believe, but to help us all understand the differences between capitalism, socialism, and democratic socialism, because understanding comes before opinions. And now that we've talked about capitalism, let's talk about democratic socialism.
I'm glad you kept that going, David. We didn't need to break.
I'm like, what? I thought for a minute we were going to go to the next segment, but I don't think we should leave them like that. So you know what? Let's move it on to democratic socialism. Timmia, I'm gonna start with you. People hear the phrase democratic socialism almost every single election cycle. What is that?
That's a good question. I would say the easiest way to explain it is this. Democratic socialism generally supports democratic elections, private businesses, and individual freedoms, but it also argues that government should play a larger role in making sure essential services like healthcare, education, retirement security, and worker protections are broadly available. Supporters believe markets are important, but they also believe government has a responsibility to reduce some economic inequalities and strengthen the social safety net.
So is democratic socialism the same as socialism?
Absolutely not.
No.
Okay. And help me understand that.
Those words are often used interchangeably, but they're not always the same. Different countries have defined and practiced these ideas differently. That's why it's important not to assume every nation with one label operates exactly like another.
Can I jump in right here?
Yes.
Go ahead, David.
I'm gonna say with when we talked about Social Security, and that being a form of socialism, that everybody gets the same. And then when we were talking earlier about capitalism and how we were talking about competition sparks innovation, but it also creates victims, because not everybody's going to be successful, and and we're seeing this in mergers and stuff today. Not everybody has competition, and so when those things happen, it creates an environment where people can take advantage of it. But um, you know, help me understand though, you know, how why it's important to not assume that, you know, one label operates like another. Like, why is that?
Are we dealing with the socialism or
yeah,
what?
I'm talking about the socialism. Like, why is it
Okay.
important not to assume every nation operates exactly like another?
I think many people, many Americans become confused about it. You know, we hear one word and immediately think of another country that's that they've seen on TV, but every country has its own history, its own constitution, its own economy, its own political culture, and that's why it's important to understand the ideas before we start making comparisons.
Okay, and that makes perfect sense. So help me define socialism, Errol.
Okay, so traditionally, socialism refers to an economic system where the government or the public has a much larger role in owning or controlling major industries and economic resources. And throughout history, different countries have practiced socialism in different ways. So some maintain democratic elections, others became authoritarian governments. Those political differences mattered. So when people discuss socialism today, it's important to ask which country's experience are we talking about? Because history teaches us there isn't just one single model of
And
socialism.
and I think that is a great point that you just pointed out, because people argue about words without defining the words first.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I appreciate you making light of that. But I want to ask you, you know, let's move into history. I want to ask you this, because if we're going to talk about honestly about capitalism, we have to also talk honestly about America's economic history.
Mm-hmm. And it's very important that we talk about America's economic history, because America's economic story is one of incredible innovation, but it's also one that includes painful truths. And since we're a human rights, labor rights show, we'll really talk about it today. We're not going to touch it and tiptoe around it, but historians broadly agree that enslaved Africans, I'm sorry, were treated as property under the law, and their forced labor generated enormous wealth for plantation owners while also contributing to industries connected to banking, insurance, shipping, textiles, commerce, the cotton economy down in the South. For example, became one of the largest economic engines in the world during the 19th century. So the wealth benefited many institutions and not just plantations. Enslavement was first and foremost a profound violation of human dignity and freedom. It was also an economic system that enriched many individuals as well as institutions. And that understanding that history doesn't mean modern capitalism is the same as slavery. It means acknowledging, and let me say that one more time. It means acknowledging that America's economic development included both extraordinary innovation and profound injustice. We cannot leave that chapter out. Touch your neighbor and say, we cannot leave that chapter out. People want to leave out that part of America's labor story, but it is so important that we all understand that that is a part of America's labor story.
And that's important because history isn't about making people feel guilty.
Not at
History,
all.
no, it's not. And that's where people get it messed up. History is about helping us understand how we got here. We can't fully understand today's conversations about wealth, labor, and opportunity if we ignore yesterday.
We cannot ignore yesterday.
No, we can't. And after slavery ended, the conversation about labor didn't end, it changed. Workers fought for the 8-hour workday, safer workplaces, the weekends, child labor laws, fair wages, civil rights, equal opportunity. Many of these rights workers enjoy today didn't simply appear. People had to organize, people had to march, negotiate, and sacrifice.
Well, and that's what brings us to a very important point. You know, economic systems do not exist in a vacuum. They are shaped by people. They are shaped by lawmakers. They're shaped by workers. They're shaped by business leaders. They're shaped by voters. And every generation leaves its fingerprint on the economy it inherits. So why does this matter today? So let me ask each of you one final question before we move into the next part of this discussion. Why should today's worker care about understanding these economic systems? I'll start with you, Errol.
Okay. The workers, let me just put it plain, because understanding leads to better decisions. When workers understand economics, they're better prepared to vote, to negotiate, to advocate, and really to participate in the shaping of the work, of the future of work, because knowledge is power. Then you won't be cutting your nose off to spite your face.
Facts.
And for me, it's about making informed decisions, informed choices. Don't let social media define these terms for you. Don't let TV define them for you. You got to learn about them yourself, understand them for yourself, ask questions, and then decide where you stand. And don't be afraid of the conversation. People can disagree respectfully. That's part of democracy.
Right.
The goal isn't to win an argument. The goal is to become more informed, be a more informed citizen.
Well, I'm glad we decided to keep going with this, because this is a powerful conversation, you know.
It is.
And today we've defined the terms, but you know, we've also looked at the history. But now I think we need to connect all of this to the workplace and, you know, answer the question, you know, where do labor unions fit? Are unions capitalists? You know, are they socialists? Are they something entirely different? So, you know, let's separate fact from fictions with a myth versus fact lightning round. We're going to ask questions that every family should be discussing around the dinner table, and close by asking perhaps the most important question of all. What kind of America and what kind of economy do we want to leave the next generation? You know, so again, we spent the first half of today's show defining capitalism, democratic socialism in plain language. We've explored America's economic history and understanding why that history matters. So now we're going to bring this conversation home. All right. You know, we're going to ask, what does all this mean for working people? Where do unions fit? And perhaps, you know, like I said, the big question, what kind of economy are we going to try to build? So where do labor unions fit? Errol, let's talk about labor unions. Some people say,
I'm glad you asked.
Yes. Let's talk about labor unions, bro. You know, some people say unions are socialists. Other people say unions are simply part of capitalism. Where do unions fit, Errol?
All right. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions people have. Labor unions exist inside capitalist economies, and their purpose isn't to replace private businesses. Their purpose is to give workers a collective voice. Instead of one employee negotiating alone, workers negotiate together. That's where you have your collective bargaining, and it will address wages and benefits and working conditions and job security and healthcare and workplace safety. So unions don't determine whether an economy is a capitalist or socialist. They exist to balance the relationship between workers and employers. And Timmia earlier called out the list of the different things that the unions have fought for, and we today still enjoy.
So you mean to tell me unions, they're not trying to eliminate business? Because
No.
I watched Fox News yesterday, and that's all I heard.
No. No. Healthy businesses create jobs. Healthy workers help businesses succeed. And the goal is finding the balance because workers deserve fair treatment. You know, uh, employers deserve productive businesses, but collective bargaining is one tool. I'm sorry, that helps both sides work toward those goals. And that's why it's very important that that we negotiate our contracts to make sure that companies are not getting over on the workers.
You're right. And most people probably don't even realize how many things unions have accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Weekends, the 8-hour workday, overtime pay, safer workplaces, employer paid insurance, retirement plans, paid vacations. Those
Mm-hmm.
weren't always guaranteed. People organized to win many of those improvements. And even workers who have never belonged to a union have benefited from standards unions fought to establish. That's part of the labor history many people never learn.
And that's part that burns my goat right there because nothing. Go on, David.
Well, hey, as promised, we're gonna get into a myth versus fact. All right. So
All right.
let's have a little fun. It's gonna be our lightning round. All right. You ready? Myth or fact? Y'all ready? Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. Capitalism guarantees everyone becomes wealthy.
Myth. Capitalism creates opportunity, but outcomes vary based on many factors. It's including education, access to capital, economic conditions, discrimination, public policy, and individual circumstances.
Okay. Fact versus myth. Socialism means the government owns your home.
Myth. That oversimplifies a complex subject. Different countries have adopted different policies, and broad labels don't accurately describe every system.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Myth or fact? America.
Hey, he didn't get to read
you
the
gotta hear
question.
the question first now. Come on now. We can't cheat. All right, let's do this. Myth or fact? America has already publicly funded programs.
Fact. Now, public schools, Social Security, Medicare, police departments, fire departments, roads, libraries, the military. These are all examples of services funded through taxes.
Right. They're getting enough of our taxes too.
Okay. Myth versus fact again. People can disagree about how much government should do.
Fact. That's one of the central debates in American democracy, that the disagreements isn't usually about whether government has a role. It's about how large the role should be.
Okay. Myth versus fact. Labor unions only exist in socialist countries.
Myth. The United States has had labor unions for well over a century.
Yes.
So have many countries with market economies.
Okay. Well, I appreciate y'all playing the game. I think we would have won the big prize because there was some truth telling in those rounds. But I want to next get into like the dinner table questions,
Okay.
and instead of us arguing over labels, maybe these are questions that all of us and our families should actually be discussing.
Mm-hmm.
Should healthcare primarily exist in a market type service, or should it be a public service,
Mm-hmm.
or a combination of both? Should college be more affordable?
Absolutely.
Should workers have paid family leave?
Yes.
Should every person working a full-time job earn enough to support themselves and their family?
Absolutely.
And like you were saying earlier, Errol, should retirement be more secure? Like you said, we don't see pensions no more.
Mm-hmm.
Should billionaires pay higher taxes than middle income families?
Mm-hmm.
Should workers have a stronger voice on the job?
And David, those are real conversations. Those are real questions. Those are real conversations that you can have at the dinner table, because every family is affected by those questions, regardless of political party.
And notice something. Answering those questions doesn't automatically make someone capitalist or democratic socialist or anything else. People can arrive at different conclusions while sharing many of the same goals.
Right.
Well, and I think that's where this conversation comes together today. Instead of asking which system wins, maybe we should ask, what kind of America do we want?
I love that question, because nobody wakes up saying, I hope capitalism wins today. People wake up saying, can I pay my mortgage? Can I afford childcare? Can I buy groceries? Can I retire? Can my children have a better future than I did? That's what people care about.
Yeah. And Errol, what does history teach us about that?
History teaches us that America has never been static. We've changed, we've grown, we've corrected mistakes, we've expanded rights. And you see how I got weave in there? Because we just got through celebrating 250 plus 5. And I know you guys talked about that, but at last week, and almost every major improvement in the lives of working people happened because ordinary people became involved. The abolition of slavery, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, voting rights, workplace safety laws, the weekend collective bargaining, none of those simply appeared. People organized, people educated themselves, people voted, people negotiated, people challenged the status quo. History reminds us that economic systems don't improve on their own. It is us, it is we, it is the people of America that improve all of these things.
And that is why education matters. When people understand history, they understand economics and understand their rights. They're less likely to be divided by slogans and more likely to be united by solutions. Today's conversation wasn't about convincing you to become a capitalist or a democratic socialist or anything else. It was about something much, much bigger, understanding, because an informed citizen is harder to mislead. An informed worker is harder to exploit. An informed voter is better equipped to participate in democracy. America has always been an experiment in self-government, an experiment in freedom, an experiment in opportunity. Along the way, we've experienced extraordinary successes, and we've also made painful mistakes. Our responsibility isn't to ignore each other, it's to learn from both. Whether we're talking about slavery and emancipation, the rise of labor unions, the Great Depression, Social Security, the Civil Rights Movement, or today's debates over healthcare, housing, education, wages, and retirement, one question still remains. How do we build an economy that rewards hard work, respects human dignity, creates opportunity, protects freedom, and leaves the next generation better off than the last? At our CWA Our Power Radio, we may not all agree on every answer, but we do believe in asking thoughtful questions, having respectful conversations, and making sure working people have a seat at the table. Because democracy just isn't happening on election day. It happens every day that informed citizens choose to participate.
You're listening to KYOK 1140 AM and the all-new 106.5 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you by visiting kyokradio.org and pressing the Listen Live option. Tune in live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on kyokradio.org, the CWA Strong app, or your preferred podcast player. Search for the CWA Hour Power on your favorite podcast player. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at CWA National Human Rights to stay connected. Share your thoughts and join the conversation. Well, up next, I know you guys have missed this. So you know what time it is. It is now time for the Marshall Minute with David Marshall. Good morning, David.
All right. Good morning and welcome back, Errol. That's how you do it. That's how you open up a segment, my brother. You know, you cannot go wrong with the elements. You cannot go wrong with the elements. And today I'm going to keep in this theme. You know, Errol, you talked earlier about, you know, pensions and retirement, and it made me think, you know, let's talk about retirement planning today. And so, you know, let's say if let's say you've put off saving for retirement, you put it on a back burner. You know, what are some good ways that we can start? You know, because it's never too late to start, but also know that it's never too early either. You know, there are reasons why retirement planning is such a touchy subject. You know, there's been recent planning in progress studies that surveyed national attitudes and behaviors about money that found that, you know, 22% of Americans have less than $5,000 in retirement savings, and 15% have no savings at all. And that's actually an improvement over the previous year, you know, but this isn't about sounding the alarm bell or, you know, causing a guilt trip or anything. This is about starting or improving your retirement strategy so that you'll be financially set for the long term. You know, while strategies will change depending on your situation, retirement planning is about looking towards the future. And for that, there's no better time than the present to start. So if you're in your 50s and you don't like what you see in your retirement account, consider some of these course correcting steps. You know, the first thing is make your 401k your savings priority. You know, if your employer offers a 401k or a 403b plan, participate or up your participation if you're already involved. You know, if there's an employee matching contribution, try to contribute at least up to that amount. You know, matching contributions are meant to incentivize savings, so take advantage of it. You know, it's free money in your pocket, actually in your retirement savings account. And because your contributions are pre-tax, you'll see additional benefits when tax season arrives. Secondly, take advantage of the IRS catch-up contribution. Believe it or not, the IRS is on your side, at least when it comes to your retirement. The annual limit for tax-free contributions to a 401k and similar plans was raised from $19,500, and those over 50 can contribute an additional $6,500 from $6,000 in 2019. Those 50 and older can also make extra $1,000 tax-free IRA contributions on the top of the $6,000 annual cap. So please check with, you know, the IRS website for specific contribution details, or talk to your retirement planner. Number three, consider extending your work and delaying Social Security. Now, if you've always envisioned retiring at age 65, for me, it's 62, but it may be worth rethinking that. Start positioning yourself now for work that you would enjoy doing for a few years after your current job. You know, retired workers are increasingly valued as consultants and mentors. And so if that interests you, then, you know, start laying the groundwork now. You know, at the same time, you know, consider delaying taking your Social Security benefits. You know, every year you delay up until age 70, your benefits can increase by 8%. If you don't take a post-career job, you may find that 8% enticing and doable. But also, you know, rethink your financial commitments. You know, now this part may be difficult, you know, especially when it involves folks close to you. You know, for example, you may have always intended to pay for your child's education, but the truth is your children have a lifetime to pay off a reasonable amount of student loans. Your lifetime for retirement security is a whole lot shorter than that. But, you know, some more good news, there's currently a lot of discussion about college affordability and free tuition, you know, that's being discussed, you know, with legislators and within the government, which could help make this decision, you know, easier in the future. But I want to keep going here. Why is it never too early to start saving? Well, you know, it's tempting to think that the younger folks have it easier when it comes to retirement savings. You know, time is definitely on your side if you're in your 20s, but that luxury can also be a disadvantage if it leads to procrastination. You know, so, you know, try to keep these things in mind if you're a younger person starting to save for retirement. Get in the habit. Most of us are creatures of habit, and the challenge is develop more good ones than bad ones. So if you get in the habit of saving for retirement early on, you'll increase the chances that you'll stick with it throughout your working life. As with older investors, take advantage of 401k plans and employer matching contributions. With your longer investment window, you'll benefit from the compound interest on top of interest that can turn modest lifetime savings into a secure retirement nest egg. You know, annual savings of over $4,500 over a 45-year career can turn into $1 million retirement. And if you add that with an employer match, you could save as little as $2,250 a year to reach that goal. You know, but you also need to make it automatic. You take advantage of payroll deduction to support your good habit. If you don't see the money, you're not going to miss it. And at the same time, add to your retirement contribution as your salary increases. You know, a benefit to your retirement, that's going to be a benefit to your retirement and your tax bill. And then, you know, reassess your investments. Regular automated investing isn't the same thing as neglected investing. Being a lifelong investor means your life circumstances will change and your financial priorities and risk tolerance will change along with it. So, you know, set up regular intervals to make sure that the investments that you have match your goals and your situation. You know, consider engaging with a financial advisor, you know, as that wealth increases. And definitely, if you're with CWA, we have a ton of folks that are really know our contracts and are qualified to give you that advice. Number 4, resist temptation. One downside of investing early is that there will be more instances where you'll be tempted to use your retirement savings for something other than retirement. You know, there may be severe cases where it becomes necessary, but in all other cases, try to say no. And then why you should start now, you know, because I think you deserve a great life in retirement and because it won't get any easier tomorrow. But as I said earlier, if you need additional motivation, please consider contacting an advisor who specializes in retirement planning. You know, CWA has many vetted financial advisors who know our contract and benefit plans, so utilize their expertise because just like working with a personal trainer, the support of a professional financial advisor can be just what we need to get us where we want to be. And just remember, it's never too late to act. Small steps today can lead to a more secure retirement in the future. So until next time, this has been the Marshall Minute, where living well is the greatest act of love. Sending it back to you, Errol.
All right, David and the Marshall Minute.
I was trying to be educational today. It's usually feel good stuff, but today we trying to be responsible.
Hey, nothing like a good motivational minute for retirement. You listen to KYOK 1140 AM and the Aldo 106.5 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you by visiting KYOKradio.org and pressing the listen live option. Tune in live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on KYOKradio.org, the CWA Strong app, or your preferred podcast player. Search for the CWA Hour Power Favorite Podcast. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at CWA National Human Rights to stay connected, share your thoughts, and join the conversation. And we're going to get into this just a little bit more. We want to talk about the end of reading. Is labor entering a post-literate era? You know, every week we try to bring your conversations that matter to working people, but every now and then we stumble across a topic that makes us stop and examine ourselves. And today's topic is one of those conversations that we need to have. And I'm going to ask a simple question, and I don't want anybody to answer it quickly. Who knows your union contract better? You or your supervisor? Think about it. Think about that. And if your supervisor knows your rights better than you do, who's really operating from a question of strength? Now, before anybody says, well, Errol, I thought this segment was about reading, stay with us. Because this isn't really about books, it's about something bigger. It's about learning. It's about knowledge. It's about whether working people are slowly become dependent on somebody else to tell us what our rights are instead of knowing them for ourselves. And David, let me start with you because I know you have a whole bunch to say about this. When you hear that question, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, for me, the first thing that comes to mind is honesty, because I think a lot of us, including union officers, if we're honest, we know pieces of the contract better than we know the entire contract. Most of us become experts in the sections that we use every day, but very, very few people ever sit down and read the whole agreement from beginning to ending. And that's interesting because management doesn't have that luxury. They're trained in it. The HR studies it. The labor relations group, they study it. Their attorneys study it. So why shouldn't we as workers study it?
Right. And that's exactly what got me thinking about this topic. Over the years, I've had members call me with every question imaginable. And I'm sure you guys have had that done as well. They will come with the questions, can management do this? What happens if I'm written up? And one of the first questions I usually ask is this right here. Have you looked at your contract? And sometimes they'll say no. Sometimes they'll say, I've got it somewhere. Y'all gonna help me with this? Sometimes they'll laugh and say, I don't even know where it is. Now, I'm not saying that to embarrass anybody. I'm saying it because I think we've created a habit of asking somebody else before asking the document that's supposed to protect us.
And Errol, that's not unusual. As a steward, I can tell you how many calls I've gotten after the fact. The member has already signed the discipline. They've already had the meeting. And then they call. Now we're trying to put toothpaste back in a tube.
That's a good way of putting it. Putting toothpaste back in the tube. I'm going to use that one too.
Y'all know how it goes.
Go on, Timmia.
Seriously though, like for real. I wish more people would call before something happens instead of after, because the contract isn't just there to help you recover. It's there to help prevent problems.
Well, can I ask you something?
Absolutely.
Do you think that people don't read because they don't care or because they don't know where to begin? Because I'll be honest, when I first looked at a union contract, it looked intimidating. It wasn't, like something you pick up and read for fun.
Well, and Errol, that is a fair question. Contracts don't have pictures in it, and they're not an exciting read. You're not going to be looking forward to going home and reading the contract. But at the end of the day, neither are insurance policies. Neither are retirement plans. Neither are mortgage documents. The problem is that some of the most important documents we'll ever sign are not fun reads. And I'll tell you, for me, when I get union questions, and it's helped me throughout my tenure as a representative of the union and activist, is whenever I'm being asked something about the contract, I literally go to the contract, I find it, and then I send that paperwork to them. I send that page to them so that they understand this is not my opinion. This is the collective bargaining agreement where it says this. That way you're always backing up what it is that you're telling folks.
Exactly. And maybe, I don't, I don't want to get too far in this, but this is something that we really need to, to dig into even more. And maybe we've convinced really ourselves that because something is complicated, somebody else should understand it for us. But I really don't think that's healthy.
No. I agree, because the more I understand my contract, the less likely I am to be intimidated when something happens. Knowledge gives people confidence.
Right. And my parents used to tell me something growing up. If I asked a question, sometimes they'd answer it. Other times they say, go look it up. And at the time, I thought they were just trying to avoid the question. But when you really look back, they were teaching me how to think. They were teaching me how to find answers instead of depending on somebody else to provide the answer. And I think somewhere along the way, we've lost a little of that.
Well, and there's actually a term that researchers use for some of what we're kind of describing today, and they call it, a post-literate era. Now that doesn't mean people can't read. It just means that reading is no longer a primary way people learn. A lot of us watch videos, we listen to podcasts, we scroll social media, we ask AI, we can consume our information in short bursts. And none of those things are bad. But the question is, what happens when they replace studying instead of supporting it?
All right, David, we're going to stop right there. And we'll probably go into a part 2 on next week on this particular subject, because I think this is one that we really need to delve into. And then the next one that we'll start talking about on next week is talking about union leaders really being leaders, in the communities and different things like that. And so Makia has sneaked on in here. So Makia, just come on and tell everybody hello, because you've gotten in here in the last 5 minutes.
I'm not saying nothing with that kind of intro.
Where was her song, Errol? You supposed to have her song now.
The producer is supposed to play the back. That's what I'm supposed to. I'm supposed to be in the background, making sure everything goes smoothly. But I'm gonna say hello. Great show. I have been listening. I just haven't been able to actually tune in. I'm sure that you already told everybody about our upcoming human rights conference. Some of us will be going to NAACP in Chicago this weekend, so we're looking forward to that, and then APRI early next week. And so there's a lot going on in the progressive movement and the human rights movement, and so that's why I wasn't able to be as present as I wanted to be. But the show was great, and I hope all of the listeners, I hope you all gained some enlightenment today.
Thank you so much, Makia. An hour is not long enough to be with you, and a week is too long to be away from you. You've been tuned into the CWA Human Rights Hour Power broadcast. I hope something you heard today has inspired you to take action toward creating positive change in the world. Every person has the power to make a difference, no matter how small. And by working together, we can create a world where human rights are respected and valued. So I encourage each of you in the listening audience to reflect on your role in promoting human rights to effect change in your communities and beyond. Know that you are not alone in your quest for a more just and equitable world. When faced with injustice, it can be easy to lose hope and give up. But remember, justice may be slow like the truth, but when it finally comes, it will stand. For David Marshall, Timmia Wiley, Makia Jones, and everyone here at CWA Hour Power Radio, I'm Errol Minor. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep learning, keep serving, keep standing up for one another. And as always, keep building power. See you next week.